Welcome to the True North Compliance Podcast, where we discuss regulatory and compliance issues for Canadian business.
Hello, I'm Shawn O'Hara, and thanks for listening.
Hello, everyone. My guest today is Dean Bennett. He is the founder of Compu-Tek Computer Services, a technology solutions provider, often referred to as IT, which means information technology. He's based here in Victoria. He has over 30 years of experience in computer hardware and software and is a certified electronics engineering technologist, having studied at Southern Alberta Institute of Technology. Before starting Compu-Tek, Dean owned MTI Computers on Pear Street in Victoria back in the 1990s until 2002. He is recognized for his expertise and trusted service to clients throughout the Greater Victoria area. Welcome, Dean.
Oh, thanks, Shawn. How are you doing?
Good. Tell me a bit more about Compu-Tek. What is it, and what do you do?
Compu-Tek. Well, it's a company I formed back in 2003 after I sold my computer store. And it's basically primarily focused on business clients. So service and sales and consulting in the IT industry. So basically, I help business clients set up new systems, networks, Wi-Fi, servers, and backup systems, and also do security consulting for them. But also do sell hardware. We're an authorized Lenovo and Dell dealer. So I get the good stuff, the business class, not the bad stuff like the box stores. And it gives the clients more peace of mind. Plus, it gives them usually 3-year warranty and up to 7 years of updates. So our box store computers only about 3 years. And I've been doing this for a very long time. So I've got a lot of experience behind me. And I like to help my clients keep them out of trouble, make sure their data is safe, and that their business can run smoothly.
What is that difference between the box stores, as you mentioned, and what you sell?
Well, the box stores sort of focus their sales about sort of price and, getting quantity over quality, where business class is kind of reversed. It's more about the quality than it's the quantity. So, you might see a bigger hard drive, things like this, but they're not necessarily needed. It doesn't speed anything up or help anything, but that's what the box store is offered, and it can move people to buy it. The only problem is that most of the products sold in a box store, they're usually shipped to vendor for repair. So you might just ship it to Vancouver or Toronto to repair it, so not local repair. So that's not good for a business to be down for a length of time. They usually offer a 1-year warranty. So that's the factory warranty is 1 year, which usually means the updates go for another 2 years to make it, 3 or 4 years of updates for the firmware, which is like the BIOS, et cetera, in the computer. So it's usually used for light duty use and kind of people at home. So in our business, you're running that computer 8 hours a day, 5 days a week at least. And that's where the business cross comes in. It's designed to run for a long time, be more durable, and then plus, ideally, you change your computers every 5 years. So they have up to 7 years of updates. It'll make sure that you're going to get all that firmware update, which is going to keep it more secure and not having those firmware updates. So it's a combination between software and hardware that keeps your computer safe and running smoothly and secure.
I think I got my computer from you, 3 years ago, and it's running 10 plus hours a day. It's quite powerful.
I think it was like about 5 years ago.
2020. Yeah, it was after the lock. Yeah, I know. I've been impressed with it. So tell me, what core values do you bring to Compu-Tek and to your clients?
Core values. Mine is basically I wouldn't sell anything that I wouldn't buy myself. So, I like to make sure our product's been tested and proven. I want to make sure that the products, I think, warranty and support behind them. So, for instance, of a product like a Brother, I'm not fond of Brother printers. There's no phone support anymore. They're expensive to actually run. Like the toners cost you 2 to 3 times as much as a good Lexmark business class. So, giving the clients value, but integrity is the most important thing to me. Is to be honest with the clients and to make sure that I'm doing the best I can to keep them safe and secure. And, when I quote a computer, I don't go overboard with it. I quote what I feel I need, but at least I try to put in that system that's going to last them at least 5 years. So if you underscale something, it's going to lose its performance with time, as typical as most computers do, and then you're going to wind up with a slower machine down the road. And then, but you're still not the 5-year mark. So I want to make sure they're getting good use out for the next 5-6 years.
So your industry, how regulated it? Like, is it like people can buy from the box stores? They can buy from IT pros. How do they know what they're getting? How is there any government regulator that you deal with?
No, there's no regulation. I mean, anybody can buy hardware anywhere. You can buy it out of China, or Taiwan, any place you want to, or just locally. The thing about it is that, for instance, with Lenovo, they had an issue with China because China was stealing military secret, and the military was actually stealing company secrets, and they stopped manufacturing computers in China for over 5 years. A few of them are back there now, but most of them are made in Mexico and the US because they didn't want them to be embedding spyware into it. So there's a higher standard when it comes to the business class. Even like laptops, they're 18 mil spec. It means they test the military specifications 18 times over, so they're very durable. So they're really built to last. It's more about, giving the client good quality. Like the little ThinkPads is what the government agencies here use. So they want durability and lasting products. So pretty much it's sort of like a self-regulated one. So it's your choice of what you want to purchase. When it comes to higher scale cloud monitoring antivirus software, that's something you have to be an authorized dealer. Same with some Microsoft products. And a few other ones, you have to authorize to sell it so you can buy that product in a box store.
And you're authorized?
Yes.
So is that sort of like the quality control or the consumer protection sort of thing?
Yeah, they want to make sure that people that are selling it are vetted. They know what the product is selling, so they give the client the right product, and make sure that they're going to be, implementing it properly. That how to properly install it and work it. So these are for the antivirus, it's like called endpoint products. So basically, it reports to an endpoint portal to let the person know that the software is being, the computers are monitored. If something goes wrong, that there's somebody's notified by email. When you get your box store antivirus, they don't do anything like that at all. You're relying on a little icon on the screen to say, hey, I stopped working, it was relaxing. So they want to make sure that their product's being properly used. That's one of the reasons for having the certifications.
Yeah, and with the big box, the software, the antivirus and so on, that becomes dependent on the people using it to recognize there's an issue, and often they don't.
Yes, well, it happens a lot of times. They don't see that it's not working. Same with the backup system. It doesn't send notifications it's failed or that it stopped working. And then the person's like, oh, I thought my computer's backed up. It's like, nope, it's been a few months since it's worked at all.
Yeah.
Online thing. I just ran it that recently with a client using one. Well, I set up backup systems and Microsoft can say, oh, sign into OneDrive. But when they did that, they kind of broke the backup system I had because it moved those files from the user folders into the OneDrive folder. So the backup software I set up was no longer backing those files because they can move different locations. And what happened too is that client a few months ago got signed out of OneDrive and never noticed it. So they were having zero backup on their computer, nothing online, nothing locally, but there was no real, other than the public notification, which they were obviously ignoring, they had no backup system. So I had to straighten that out for them. And sync systems are not really backup systems. They're just syncing your data to the cloud. Yes, you can recover data from them, but they're very limited. Dropbox has a limitation where if more than 30% of your files are deleted, they're unrecoverable. And we're a backup system. Yeah, but where proper backup system, it's like a one-way trip. It goes to the backup. It's not meant to be synced somewhere else. And it gets different versions of that file. And you can go back 6 months, a year later and recover that data.
And what does a sync do, you mentioned? And that sync is in synchronize.
Yeah, so synchronize, so your Google Drive, your OneDrive, your Dropbox are all synchronized type systems. So typically, if you delete a file from the system, you can recover it within 30 days, but then after that, it's permanently removed. So you can't recover that file. So let's say you accidentally deleted your resume, and 6 months later, oh, I'm looking for a job again. I can't get, where's my resume? Well, you delete it, it's gone. If it was a backup system, which is a one-way trip, it would still stay there until you have more than, let's say, 30 or more % differential of files being different. But you could still go back months later and recover that file. So sync systems basically this convenience. So let's say you got a desktop and laptop, you want to be able to access files on both, and it will synchronize between the two and allow you to do that. But you got to be careful because, like I said, if you delete something after 30 days, it's gone.
Wow. It's like, I'm wondering how paranoid I would become about what to delete and what not to delete.
Yeah. Now, so you'll think, oh, well, it's backed up at some OneDrive or Google Drive or something. It's like, yeah, not really. I mean, and the backup systems I use, they actually send email notifications. So when the backup's complete, it emails the user, says backup's complete and it's done. If the backup system completely fails, well, they don't get the email. So they watch out for that. So every day they get that email saying it's completed. If there's an error backing it up, it will send the email and say there's an error on it. So you get confirmation your data is actually being backed up at all. Sync systems do not do that at all. You have to pay attention to how the cloud system works. So in OneDrive, if you notice that it has a circle with a green check mark, it means it's locally saved in your computer and it's in the cloud. If it's a picture of a cloud, it's only saved in the cloud. There's no local copy. The chance you take is that if somehow your cloud account gets compromised and everything's sitting in the cloud, well, your data could be gone. And I've seen that happen before. People, 2FAs can get hacked, especially text ones, and they could, compromise an account and remove your data.
Okay. So the 2FA, the two-factor authentication, they're able to get into OneDrive.
If they don't have the Microsoft Authenticator on, then they're more likely to get into it.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I use OneDrive and I'll delete something sometimes and it'll pop up and ask me if I want to delete it locally or on all devices.
Yeah.
And that can make people ponder, am I deleting the right thing?
Yeah. And if you delete it locally, it could stay in the cloud, but then eventually it's going to wind up removing from the cloud.
So it'd be safer to have a professional backup system.
Yes. Yeah.
Just trying to think. Yeah.
Yeah. Then you're basically, think of it as a one-way trip. Like you got a safe in the house. So you're taking that data, you're taking a copy of it, you're putting the safe, and then you're closing the safe out until the next time you go to back it up again. When you have a synchronization system, well, it's like that door of the safe is always open. You're just putting data in and out of it. And like I said, if you delete it, it could be gone for, permanently gone if it's deleted more than 3 days.
Right. And with a good backup, then people could even back up their archives and just leave them and know that they're safe.
Yeah.
Well, neat. So what are your thoughts on Kaspersky, since you mentioned about not wanting spyware put onto our computers built in China?
Kaspersky, I think, it's from Russia.
Yeah.
No.
He still lives in Moscow, from what I understand, at the fountain.
Yeah, I wouldn't touch it.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't. I've heard some banks and governments won't touch it because of that, even though it seems to be a good product.
Yeah, like with China, the reason, it's literally like, don't get any backup systems with China, because the policy of the Chinese government is that if they ask any company for their data, they have to give it to them. So if you there was a backup system I saw one time, which was like in Taiwan and China, it was like spread around. And I don't see this backup system anymore, but it was like, okay, if it's in China and the government says, hey, give me that data, they've got it. They've got all your information. We're from the US. Yeah.
And that's all the users.
Yeah. So you gotta be careful where that data is being stored. There's a lot of policies with medical and government here that it can only be stored in Canada. So there's only servers in Canada. Microsoft has servers in Canada. There's some local, like Backblaze is one of them. It's a Canadian company that is local backup. I use one out of the States, but they're pretty reliable. And I've talked to them about security. And basically, you create your own encryption key. I said, if you have your own encryption key on that, we don't have it. I said, even the FBI could come in with a warrant and ask for your data. Unless you give them that key, they can't get it.
Good. Do you see high-speed computers down the road, or higher, or AI being able to break that at some point?
Only thing coming up, they've kind of hit that limitation of how fast they can make it. I mean, they can only make the chips so small, or the transistors so small now, they're hitting their limit. And so, there is things they can do to speed it up, because it's not just the processor. You kind of think of it like putting a big engine into a car. And you've got that big engine, which is a processor, which is fast, but there's also the RAMs. And think about the RAM being like the transmission that transmits the data from the processor back and forth. and then you got to, put it to ground to the tires. So it's kind of the same thing that, probably get faster RAM speeds, which are going to speed computers up. SSD drives have been a very big process of getting more speed in a computer, because writing the hard drive was the slowest thing. It's like, it used to be like 10 times slower than the RAM. Now that SSDs are getting almost close to the RAM speeds. So that's what we're going to see is in other areas. The only thing that's going to make things faster is when they get quantum computing, but that one, they're having a lot of issues with it. It's, you're taking a state that's like instead of 1 0, it's in multiple states, and having corrections. And I was reading articles recently about Google and other companies that are trying to develop it, and they're having a lot of issues with error correction. They can't get it to be reliable enough and to get enough errors to, make the data valid that's coming out of it. So that's going to be a long ways down the road before that ever happens.
Right. And we'll deal with any issues that come as a result of that.
Yeah.
So getting back to, let's say, regulation and compliance and so on, how can someone tell when they're hiring a company like yours that they're actually hiring people who are certified and might know what they're doing?
Well, the good thing to do is get references, to ask them for references of their companies that we didn't work for. Also, one thing's myself, I'm bondable, so I put that in my business cards to know that I'm, never had any criminal activity or records or anything like that. Because it's kind of hard to bond an IT person, because that's more of a materialistic thing than software. Making sure they got errors emissions insurance, which I have myself. So, in case something goes wrong, I've got some, protection behind it, and I'm not going to do anything that's going to wind up using that insurance at all. Somebody's got a little bit of background, like if they got a computer science degree or engineering or technologist degree behind them, that gives them a lot more background information. When I was in school, we actually wrote, machine coding language for processors. We had to learn about CPUs and RAM and how they work. So there's a lot of background that I did to help me quite a bit in my business. And, when people, started talking about cache, processors, I knew how that cache worked, how to make it faster, what types of cache were better for performance. So that background does help quite a bit. So it's always good just to ask questions and, and get references, from somebody before they hire somebody in to take over their IT. Because when you're in there, you got access to all their data, like everything. So you want to get somebody you can trust.
Yeah, we can become quite vulnerable.
Yes.
So it's not a regulated industry, but you have certifications and good IT people do. Is there a way that you use that in your marketing or your messaging to put across what makes you, say, different or higher qualified than the people who don't have the certifications?
Well, I do frequently mention we're an authorized Lenovo and Dell dealer. So you have to be authorized to sell their commercial products. We're also Microsoft Authenticated. I just kind of start with those two because that's the main computer systems and hardware for servers and for desktops and laptops that we do have that authorization through them to sell the products.
Good. And they're recognized names too, Microsoft and Dell.
Yeah, very, very well known.
Okay, so that gives a degree of credibility.
Yeah.
Great. So what are some of the horror stories or the situations that you've encountered?
Oh boy, I've seen so many come through my way. I just seen some work done by people who are just sort of like, I would say, kind of like the backyard mechanic, backyard tech. And, when I had my computer store, like, people come in going, oh yeah, my nephew's so smart, on computers and stuff like this. And I turn around and say, would you let your nephew work on your Mercedes? They're like, no way, I would do that. And I said, well, do you really want them working on your, computer stuff in your business? We had this one lady came in who said, oh, my son, I want to make sure that he's not getting onto, malicious websites and things like this. And brought the computer in. Can you put like this software called Net Nanny at the time? And my tech went through it. This guy had it loaded full of viruses, other things not to mention on his computer. And basically said to her, the best thing you can do is put that computer in the same room where you are so you can monitor what he's doing. But he says, Net Nanny, he's a hacker. He'll be around in 5 seconds. People kind of assume that just because you know some knowledge that you're an expert in it. And it really takes a long time to get that expertise, over the years. And also just because you know a few things here and there doesn't doesn't mean that you're an expert in every area. Like even for myself, I'll tell clients, look, I got to research that. I got to look into it, just to be honest with them, because I don't know every single piece of software. I know how to use Excel very well, Word not so much, but that's not my forte. My forte is maintaining the software and the hardware and the systems, getting them going. I've also ran into ransomware, where some clients thought that they would, the way they service their computers was like calling on a fire. So when something happened, they call the fireman in to, put the fire out, and they call the IT guy. And because they had no maintenance done, they didn't know what was going on. So there was one client who, they had about 6 computers in the office. They got nailed with ransomware. It was going to cost them $6,000 that time to get it unlocked. But then I said, well, these guys are thieves. You don't know, are they going to unlock it or not? They've got your data now. They decided not to pay. I was able to recover their accounting data, but they said, well, we got a backup. Well, I looked up into it. The backup was also encrypted. They had a offsite backup, but that was not working. It had not been working for a couple of years. Clients that avoid the maintenance are the ones that get into the most trouble. I usually recommend my business clients every three to 4 months to get regular maintenance done. And that way you make sure those backup and all the systems are working correctly. The one tip I do have is you should know how to recover your data. So put a calendar reminder every week or 2 weeks to check your backup, that you can actually recover a file that's been backed up, so the customer themselves can recover that data. So that's my one tip for customers.
Well, what's a good way for people or business, I guess business or even home, because a lot of people use OneDrive if they've got a Microsoft subscription or Google Drive. How does that work? Or they'll just work straight off OneDrive all the time. Is that a good, reliable backup system?
Those are not backup systems. Those are sync systems. So what happens is your information is deleted. It becomes deleted everywhere. So typically with OneDrive, it's 30 days. So after you delete it within 30 days, it's permanently gone. I had a client who had a MacBook and started cleaning up his MacBook. There's no drive letters in MacBook. And he accidentally removed a bunch of data off of his Dropbox. And with Dropbox, if you remove too much data, more than 30% of your data gets deleted, you can't recover it. I had another true backup system. So with a proper backup system, what it does is a one-way trip. It goes to the cloud, it's backed up. It will create different versions of that file and retain them. So you could go back even 6 months and get to the previous version of that file. But it doesn't delete old backups until those backups become more than typically 30% differential. So 30% of them are too different, then it'll delete the older ones. A true backup system is more like a one-way one. I always recommend that people to keep their data in 3 places. One is on the computer, obviously. Second is a local backup. So it can be a external network storage drive for a business or a server, and also to have it offsite too. So an offsite location, but a natural backup. So I don't consider these sync systems a backup. And the other thing too is, what if OneDrive is connected to your email address? What if your email address gets hacked? Well, theoretically, it could allow people to get access to that data, and then you don't have your data's been gone or changed.
Would having it in the cloud like that protect it from ransomware?
They do advertise ransomware protection with OneDrive now, that they, can protect it. But things are constantly changing. So I would still, recommend a proper backup system rather than just a cloud sync system to keep your data safe, and it gives you an alternative. If something goes haywire and you can't access the cloud system, well, you've got it in another place. Don't, like the old saying goes, don't put all your eggs in one basket. So don't put all your data just in the cloud.
So if somebody has to have it on their computer and that gets infected, or they get ransomware there, or infected with a virus, and then they've got a backup in their home or office, whether that's an actual unit or just a hard drive. And then if it's in the cloud, then once it's in the cloud, and I don't mean OneDrive, I mean in an actual backup, is that protected in the cloud?
Generally, they are, because there's previous versions, so they can pull back the previous version. If the current version's been infected, they can go back to the last version and pull it back again. So it's not infecting everything. With my business clients, like have servers, they have hard drives they physically swap out every day. So they basically pull the hard drive out, take it home. This way, it's a complete offsite backup. would they be behind only 1 day if they got encrypted, if something happened? So it's one good way to do it. Even the network storage drives, you can still do a backup of that storage drive and take it away.
When we get a new computer, it can take about a day or so to upload the software that we use and to configure everything. Is there a way to do that any faster? So say something does happen to our computer, we've got everything backed up. So we may lose that day of work, but we also lose a day or two of just reconfiguring the new hardware. Is there a way around that?
Yes. So there is what's called an image backup. It's built into Windows 10 and 11. It's actually called the Windows 7 backup system still because you're using the old one, but it does an exact copy of the entire computer. So you have all the settings, all the software. Preparing a new computer can take a day or two because you've got to install the Windows, the updates, the drivers. You've got to, set up the email, the printers, all that software takes time. I use certain software which does what's called a bare metal restore. So let's say you go out and you buy yourself a Dell computer and you do this image backup with it and the Dell computer fails completely. But then the only thing available now is Lenovo. So what it does is it strips out all the drivers for Dell and allows you to restore that to the Lenovo computer, and then you just update the drivers for the Lenovo computer. So that's one of the reasons that I say on-site, because the on-site backup is what its main function is, to do complete backup of the computer system. It will then, from that point onwards, only back up changed files. But this way, their data, the entire computer system is backed up fully. And Mac computers do the same thing with Time Machine. Just there's very less control of Time Machine. It only backs up to 2 weeks. Like it'll fill up the space being used for backup, and then it wipes out the backup up to a date of only 2 weeks further back to recover data.
And often people are concerned with costs. So can you give them some rough idea what they'd be looking at to set up on-site and off-site?
Off-site backup, one of the companies that I use, the off-site is about $120 a year, and that gives you 5 terabytes of backup. So that's a one-way trip for the off-site. For on-site, for a small business, you've got 3 to 5 users. I'd say 3 users and up to maybe 20 users or so. We can use a network storage drive. And cost for that's probably around $1,000, $1,200 roughly for the network storage. And that's giving you about 4 terabytes of data to back up. So you can do multiple machines. You can go bigger. You can get up to 16 terabyte drives for those. So it has dual mirrored hard drives in case one fails on it. So that's, a very simple way. For small home users, a 2 terabyte external USB drive, but there's only certain brands that work well with the image recovery. Some other ones don't. So, if you get a lower cost ones, it may not work, but you can use those. It's just that they're connected all the time. So you want to unplug them and store them in a safe place, especially if you go away somewhere.
Okay. Lock them in a filing cabinet, or if it's small enough,
Yeah.
I don't know if people would take it on vacation, but store it somewhere.
Yeah, I wouldn't take it on vacation, but maybe give it to your neighbor or something in case the house burns down.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So they don't lose everything.
Yeah.
So what happens? Say somebody does get hacked, and let's getting into some of the compliance and regulation issues. So a company that does get hacked and they've had a privacy breach, some of that information is out there. What do they? What do you do, and what can you advise them to do? And
Well, they're supposed to report to CRA that they have been compromised. They're supposed to actually also tell all their clients, by the way, your information has been compromised. It's out there. Even if the hackers say, well, if you pay us, we won't, share it. Well, no, they do. That always happens all the time. You definitely want to inform your clients that this has happened, because they want to, maybe get some monitoring software like LifeLock to make sure that their data isn't being used for making credentials somewhere, artificial documents. They want to probably be changing passwords on their accounts, some of their banking accounts, etc., just to make sure that they can keep people out. It's kind of sad, but they said that, companies that have total data loss, so we're talking about data here previously, but it's been a survey done that 70% of companies that have total data loss go out of business within a year. So that's something you don't want to have happen. And too often I find people will have all their data, no backup, especially people with laptops. I've run into a lot of times they don't have any backup at all on their laptops on it. And they don't realize that not all their data is stored in the cloud necessarily either, only a portion of it.
And laptops are so easy to lose or to have taken.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. For a business client, I always say, look, get a desktop. The laptop is your portable one, but don't rely strictly on your laptop alone. You can get dock stations, which are convenient. I mean, yeah, it lowers costs, but, yes, it might get stolen. They might just accidentally drop it. But, if they can afford to be down for a day or two to get everything's back up and running or recovered, sure. But if you can't, then, the laptop should be a spare tool to use. And desktops are much more friendly. They're a little lower cost. You can get nice size monitors. It's a lot nicer system if you don't need that portability laptop.
Yeah, a lot more powerful too.
Yes, yes.
So that's quite the statistic of how many go out of business within a year.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the other thing, if you've lost all your data, then you got to rebuild your business from scratch because all your contacts are gone, everything's gone, if you don't have that data. The other thing too is that if a company does get hacked or compromised, it can be quite an embarrassment to them that they've done that, and the trust from the clients would be a lot less. So they may switch to some other company. They may not feel confident anymore. So it is pretty risky to allow that to happen. The biggest thing is getting tight security, and that involves getting a commercial antivirus. So commercial antivirus is not one you buy at a box store. It's not a free one, definitely not free. The commercial antiviruses have what's called endpoints. So the endpoint actually reports to a cloud portal to let you know that there's an issue with the antivirus not working or something's been compromised in the computer. When you get an antivirus that's like a small local one, it will just put like a red X on it saying, hey, it's not working. Well, if one of the staff ignores that, their antivirus isn't working at all, they could get compromised. But with an endpoint system, it will report to the cloud. The one that I'm authorized to sell and use is Semantic Endpoint. So it's one of the major governments and industries use in North America. They're quite a big company. They also used to own Norton, but Norton got sold to LifeLock. They still use the same database, but that's sort of the consumer one that's, that I recommend to people because if they don't want to get into the endpoint one, because the endpoint takes a bit of setup to do and it's licensing per station.
Right. So for a smaller home user, then Norton would be better.
Yeah, Norton would be a little bit better for that. But if you've got a business, I would definitely go with a Semantic Endpoint. And it's very locked down. Like you go to run some application that's not well known, it's going to block it right away. You got to go back in there and tell it, okay, I can open things up. It's like routers. You got your Shaw and Telus routers. The old Telus routers, they don't have the firewalls turned off by default. Those black tall box ones, the firewall's off completely. They're relying on the computer firewall, which is not good. The Shaw ones have the firewalls pretty open. The reason is they want people to be able to game and do things like this easily without any confrontations. When you get into the Sophos, like the bigger firewalls, everything's locked down right away. If you want to do something, you have to unlock it to do that. So it gives a lot more protection against it. And the higher end Sophos Extreme will actually filter content going through. So if you get a malicious web page, it'll block it from going through your system and block any content going through. So that's the two biggest area of protections is yes, definitely getting maintenance for one, getting a good firewall in place. That's a commercial firewall or just, better than the modems they supply, and also getting a commercial antivirus.
Okay. So going out, investigating, spending, or I guess contacting you, and then you would set all of that up and make the best recommendations is the route to go.
Yeah. And it's not that expensive. You're looking around $40 a month for, per client usage for Semantic Endpoint. That's for an entire year. So when you look at the cost of that versus trying to recover your data, it's way, way cheaper to, go for that commercial antivirus and the commercial firewalls. The Sophos ones they do get expensive, but they're very high quality. There's good support. But, they can get basic firewalls, they're even from $100 and up that are definitely better than what the Shaw and Telus modems offer.
Okay. What size of company do you tend to work with or industry here? Do you have any specialty in there?
Generally 5 users and up. There's, some nonprofits, but I deal a lot with accounting offices, accountants, lawyers' offices. I've got hotel client, I've got automotive industry, construction. So basically a lot of, business clients. They're anywhere from like 5 to 50 employees typically in these companies.
5 to 50. Okay. How about password security? In the old days, we used to tell people, don't write the password on a note and stick it on the computer. But sometimes, especially if people have a home office, as a lot of people do, or they work from home, that almost seems to be safer than using the same password on multiple sites or a
Yes.
weak password
Yeah.
wallet.
The best password you can use is one you can't remember. So many times people say, oh, I can't remember that. And it's like, great, that's a good password. Don't use whole names. So don't put your dog's name or your address as your password. I've seen people do this. One of the biggest mentalities I find, especially in the Victoria area, is think, oh, we're a small business. We're in a small town. Like, who's going to care about us to do it? It doesn't matter. If you get that virus to your system or you get hacked, yep, you're done. They've got you, and they don't care who you are. With passwords, like you can maybe put them on a spreadsheet, you can encrypt the spreadsheet and then, print it off for yourself, keep it local. I know people ask me about password managers all the time. One of the big ones, LastPass, which is one of the big ones, they actually had their code compromised and stolen from them. Well, it wasn't the passwords, but it was the coding, how they did their system, which means that they could get access later. So password managers, I'm not very keen on, because especially if they're online, it's just anybody in the world can get access. And that brings me to another point, if I don't mind mentioning, is about emails. Okay. You should have two-factor authentication on any email you use. If you don't, look into adding it. If you can't add it, then change your email system. One of the worst ones out there, just an example, is Shaw email. Shaw has no two-factor authentication. You can't add it to it. Websites. So somebody's got a website, let's say, johndoe.com or something, and the website, they host the email for them. Well, a lot of times those websites don't have two-factor or anything like that. When you get into like an Office 365 account, it's got two-factor authentication. You can actually go back and look to see login attempts and where they've happened. So security is very important. And like, again, I mentioned OneDrive. OneDrive uses your email address to it. So you're going to have two-factor authentication with OneDrive for sure, but you need to enable it to make it work. But, Dropbox and other ones, they do have some two-factor type authentication. So you just need to make sure that that is working enabled. I like the 365 personally, and the reason is they use the Microsoft Authenticator. So if somebody does get to the point of actually getting your password and getting in that far with it, it immediately sends a notification to your Authenticator app saying, hey, put this code number on the screen in and allow the person to access it, rather than waiting for a text message. And the reason, so then you automatically know somebody, hey, has gotten as far as getting your password. The other thing is for text message is that it can be hacked. If they really want to, they can hack your phone number and text message and get around that site. Microsoft's talked for a long time about disabling text messages, but they haven't done it yet.
So the Authenticator app is more secure.
It's more secure, yes, because you know immediately whether or not somebody's actually been trying to access has gotten to the point of actually getting into accessing your email.
Okay. What about getting prompted in the browsers? Edge and Chrome will prompt to save a password within there. How are those?
Well, you can do it. A lot of people do use it. You just got to really make sure that if you're using Chrome, that your Gmail has got a really good password on it. You got to make sure your authentication is all enabled for them. Using the Google Authenticator is one way to go with authenticating that system, because it goes strictly to your phone and generates a code and it rotates every 30 seconds. Just make sure you have that done if you want to save them on there. But make sure your passwords are complex, 10 to 12 characters. You got to use uppercase, lowercase, special characters on it. Don't use your name in there. Don't use your, a whole name on it. Like basically, if you're going to use a word, take the word and break it up. Throw different characters inside that word. But like I said, if you can't remember it, it's a great password.
And don't follow a set pattern too, even, because people will have one that they think is complex, but they remember them or they follow the same pattern from a site to
they just
site.
change one or two characters, and then once a hacker gets in, he's going to try variations of your password to get to other locations or other things. So, yes.
And once they figure out the pattern, then that's it.
There was just an article. It was about the Colonial Pipeline attack. It was a big U.S. oil company in the States that got ransomware. How they got attacked was through a VPN, an older VPN access, which allowed them, was probably through somebody's laptop. Maybe it got stolen or taken. And they were actually able to access the internal network. From the internal network, they were able to work on it and hack their system. And it was a big one. I think it was like a $10 million ransom. But the thing is, it shut down the entire pipeline and system and caused chaos, and oil prices rise in the U.S. So it was a real mess. So Yes, people like to get access to work through a VPN, which is great, but don't tell it to memorize your VPN password if you do that. Because the laptop gets stolen, they manage to hack through your login password on the laptop, then they have VPN access. So always make that password something separate that you have to manually enter in each time. Make sure you got a good VPN. The Microsoft VPN is a weak one itself, so there's other VPN systems that are much stronger to use it. You want to think of the worst case scenario and then protect it from there. So if you're going to get a laptop, you got to assume that, it could be stolen. Somebody could break into your car. You might just leave it on a coffee table in a coffee shop and walk away for 2 seconds and it's gone. That's happened to people before. So, make sure that, if they do get access, they're not going to get to your internal network in your office. And speaking of laptops, one thing Lenovo has is they have a software called Absolute Tracker, which basically it installs on the laptop, it goes into the BIOS. So if somebody steals a laptop, wipes out your operating system, it will reinstall itself and transmit the location where that laptop is. So you can, get the laptop back and recover it. It's not a very big cost, but it is a way to track it and try to recover the laptop, because a good laptop can be, $2,000, $1,500, $2,000 for a good laptop.
Yes. I guess worst case is also the phone. If we've got a password on there, we get texts through there, and we've got our authenticators and potentially a password wallet.
Yeah, you want to make sure that you got a good, passcode to 6 digits is usually a good one. Don't use the swipe method, because you can hold that phone up to a light and you can see the fingerprints mark where they swiped on the screen to unlock it. Like ZPad and whatever doing it. And that's probably the weakest one of all. So make sure that's a good password to get in. And most authenticators, like Microsoft Authenticator app, you've got to use your fingerprint or your passcode in order to open it up once you do authenticate that account. So they do take extra security on, you got to make sure it's enabled too. So if you're using the Google Authenticator, Microsoft, make sure it's using your fingerprint to actually, log in, because that's very hard to duplicate. Face recognition is one of the other ones. It's gotten better, but in the past, I heard of a hack where the daughter of a mother was able to access her phone because they looked similar to each other. And at that time, it just didn't distinguish enough to allow the person in. But now they look for things like you have to blink and stuff. So you can't just hold somebody's photo up to get into it.
It's all scary stuff.
Yeah. There's the one thing I will recommend to keep people safe is if you get an email, like typically your bank will not email you, the government will not email you. But, if you get one and you think, okay, this is legit, do not click on the links in there. Okay. Always go to your web browser, and that way you can see the address in the web bar. So if you're going to go, let's say, tdbank.com or something, just go to tdbank.com, log in from there. Don't click on the link in the email. Same with CRA. CRA has a specific websites. You can see the address in the bar. Make sure you do go that way. So just make sure that, you're not clicking on links in emails at all. It may seem convenient, but it can also download and import a virus to your computer and you won't know it. Viruses can also come in the form of JPEG files, videos, Word, Excel files. They can all be embedded in there. So that's why you want to have the good antivirus protection that's going to scan those. Free antivirus doesn't work. Nobody works for free, and there's some free ones out there, but you have to upgrade to get the extra features to scan those type of things. You have to pay for it. Just don't use a free one at all.
Something, if they do click on the link, or if they go like the regular email, I've learned that one of the things the hackers will do, they make a site that's identical to the regular one that they go to. People type in their username and their password and it fails, and they think, oh, I put in the wrong password, and then they do it again. But what's actually happened is they've been brought immediately to the correct site, but that password they put in has been tracked. So now they're able to log into their site and they think they're fine. And what they should probably do then is change that password right away.
Yes, definitely change the password right away, but they're not paying attention to the web link in it. That did happen actually in the States to a lot of US and Canadian banks. They copied all their login pages. They clicked on the link, and then what would happen in that case? I think it was called Purple Hacking Group or something. But they would be sitting there putting their password into the login page for the bank, but it wasn't working. But what happened was it sent the password to them notify them that, hey, we got your password to the bank now. While they were doing that, they were logging the person's bank account in the background and draining their bank account. And one guy in the US lost over $100,000. His bank wouldn't cover it. It was beyond what their insurance was. So a lot of banks now have two-factor authentication set up so that it will, notify you. Got to make sure that is enabled. But that's, again, it's like, don't click the link. Just go to the actual site. I did hear, now this is where, having, like some clients actually say, oh, we don't worry if our email gets hacked. Well, there was a company here in town. It was a supplier, I think, is what got hacked. They got an invoice from the supplier. And this invoice looked legit because it was what they actually had purchased, what they had paid for and everything. So on that email, there was a link there to click and pay it. And their person paid $30,000 to pay off this invoice. Then they got a call from the company going, why haven't you paid it yet? I said, well, we did. So what I think happened was that the supplier got hacked. They got a hold of their email systems or into their accounting system, one of the two. They got a copy of this invoice. They created a website with one character slightly different. They sent them an email with one character slightly different, and then faked them into paying this invoice to their bank account rather than the actual people are supposed to pay it to. And so the whole thing seemed legit. I prefer e-transfers myself, rather than log in, but some companies don't like it because things can get messed up with e-transfers. But you've got to be very careful. So that's why I'm saying always pay attention to the address you're logging into on the web page. There is some, for instance, Norton has an extension you can put into Chrome that will actually block malicious websites and detect them for you. Apologize for that. Chrome actually has an extension Norton has an extension that will go into Chrome and actually block malicious websites for you to warn you that they're malicious if they find that.
That's the paid version of Norton?
Yeah, the paid version has it. Has that extension available.
So a duplicated site, they would catch that ideally. Okay.
They might or might not. So malicious websites are ones that try to download software in the background into your browser or into your system. So a duplicated site may not have any malicious software in it. So it wouldn't necessarily detect them. For security, my take on this is stay with the commercial computer, the business class computer. There's two reasons. The one is that consumer computers is a 1-year warranty and they'll produce updates for 1 to 2 years, 2 to 3 years afterwards, after it's discontinued. With the commercial ones, they're up to 5-year warranty. So they can theoretically get up to 7 years of updates. So you're going to get a lot longer lifespan. You're going to get more reliability off that commercial computer. They'll come with Windows Pro, which has a little bit more security on it too. So you pay for what you get for it. So if you want quality, you want it to last, then the business class is the way to go on. So definitely in that area, I can focus mostly on businesses, but I sell a lot of the commercial ones to home owners too, because they want the reliability. They want it to last, and, it's a little bit of more of an investment, but if the thing lasts, twice as long, then it's paid for, right away.
There's an old expression. It's something like, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. But with computer security, I think that's quite true. They are out to get you, whether you're paranoid or not.
Yeah, like I said, just because they're a small town in Victoria doesn't mean that you're going to get ignored. It could happen to anybody, and it has happened. I've helped several people call me up and helped them out with ransomware attacks here. It doesn't matter who you are, and that's one thing like with the webmail with Shaw, is anybody in the world can go to webmail.shaw.ca, throw passwords at it till they get in, and they're into it. So your other accounts, if you, like QuickBooks Online, yeah, it's a great system. It works well. I always say, download a backup of your clients, your documents, stuff like this. Like just download those to a spreadsheet, just so you got a backup, just in case the account gets compromised. I haven't heard of it yet, but it's like real estate, location. With IT, it's backup.
That's a good one. So how can people get a hold of you?
They can go to my website, which is Compu-Tek.ca. It's COMPU-TEK.ca, and they can contact me directly from there. I'm also on LinkedIn, and I do have a Facebook page, but the website's the best form of contact. They can also see some suggestions on office setup on there. I've got some examples of some projects I've done too for network setup for clients, and some, the types of hardware that we do sell.
Great. Thank you. My guest today has been Dean Bennett. of Compu-Tek Computer Services here in Victoria. Thank you so much for joining me today, Dean.
Oh, you're welcome, Shawn. Anytime. I was very, very glad to do this.
And that's a wrap.